Thank you. Okay, so if anyone is going to have a food coma, then we're going to have to get up and do some yoga. But you won't, because this is a really, really interesting panel. My name's Ericka McCoy. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer with a company called Resonate. We are a consumer data and intelligence platform. And like many of you, we're here with a very specific purpose. We believe that better data leads to better relationships between brands and their customers, and ultimately love of brand, which is, I think, what we're all after. So today we're going to talk about what does it mean to be a purpose-driven brand and how is it manifesting itself inside of a very diverse group of companies. So first, would you guys mind introducing yourselves and just telling us your scope of responsibility, what your area is?
Yes, of course. Kelly Schneider, and I lead the consumer communication team here at Gerber and within the Nestle family. My scope includes everything from visual identity and design to brand communication and amplification efforts, as well as digital acceleration and experience.
Awesome.
Hey, I'm David Lester. I'm the co-founder of OLIPOP. My scope is trying to make sure we don't run out of money, basically.
I know that one. Thank you.
Man, that's actually pretty good. I want to have a short one like that. So I'm Rich Honeyball. I actually work for the Navy Exchange Service Command, which is a command under the U.S. Navy. I hold two roles. One is Chief Merchandising Officer for our retail division, which is about $2 billion. And I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for all of our command businesses, which includes the Navy Exchange, but also our hospitality division, our ship stores, and uniforms, and a couple of other commands as well.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I'm Shane McCarthy, Chief Marketing Officer of a Northern Virginia company called Sandboxx. What we do is we provide training content and communications for service members, some of the folks that use Rich's services, and their families as they go through the military journey.
So perfect. We're going to start with our first question, which is basically, what does it mean to be purpose-driven, and how do you bring it to life? Why don't we start in the middle? Shortest answer the first time, so now we give you...
You're picking on me because you know I gave a very contrarian answer to this question.
It's true.
Well, I would say for us, one of the things I've learned about kind of purpose-driven marketing, if you look at our product, for those of you who don't know, weren't here yesterday, we are a healthy soda. So essentially, we try and do all the things that soda does, refreshment, fun, but instead of 40 grams of sugar, we have 9 grams of dietary fiber, 8 plant-based ingredients to support digestive health. So for our business, our mission really started with my co-founder, Ben. He made a change to his diet in his teenage years, saw real benefits from making that change, not just in terms of losing weight, but also kind of his mental health, and became very obsessed with gut-brain connection and microbiology, and then focused on trying to create a product to get those benefits to the largest group of people possible. And so he didn't necessarily set out to create a soda, but he just thought, hey, why don't I put this in a soda? Because lots of people drink soda, they seem to like it. And so that's kind of how we ended up in the category. It's kind of like a Trojan horse, really, for this vehicle, which is a kind of a high nutritional supplement. And we don't really talk about the purpose of our product. And the reason for that is a lot of natural food and beverage brands, I think, get caught out because, well, you're talking about a farm that the thing was grown on, or your founder's story, or some magical ingredient. Pepsi's saying, hey, The Weeknd is playing the Super Bowl. And everybody's like, well, that sounds a lot more fun than prebiotics. So, what we found is, rather than handicapping ourselves, we said, look, we're going to market like soda. I mean, Coke, Pepsi, some of the best, global brands in the marketing space. And so we're kind of competing with them head on, but we're very serious about our purpose and our mission and ensuring that our product actually does what we purport it to do. So, we have a health advisory board led by Joe Petrosino, one of the lead guys on the Human Microbiome Project. We've done research with Purdue and Baylor medical colleges, and we're going into human clinical trials shortly as well. This is stuff that I think 90% of our consumers will probably never know or understand. But, you know, maybe we'll be at the Super Bowl one day and a lot of people will drink it as a result of that. So
I love it. It's really the Trojan horse approach, which was really, really fascinating because we always think that the purpose has to be completely marketing forward, advertising forward to be purpose built. But let's go from one of the newest brands to one of the oldest brands. What does it mean at Gerber?
Yeah, in a good way. We are the oldest brand. We are iconic.
Iconic, legendary.
Yes, we are like the Levi's of baby food. But I think that in general, you know, you need to lead with purpose across the organization and what you stand for. From kind of a mature level of baby food or, you know, OLIPOP and what you stand for to a disposable razor, you just need to understand what your focus is and what your company stands for. And I think for Gerber, it is very easy. We were founded in 1927 from Dorothy Gerber, who was straining veggies in her kitchen and realized that we needed to, you know, moms were dealing with this day to day and how do we simplify things for her, knowing kind of the complexities of motherhood and parenthood. So that's how it started with helping parents. And then, you know, it led to her writing handwritten letters to moms helping with parenting advice. So that's how it started, and we continue to have that today, and it's been automated and customized even further, but the quality is there, and that's what we focus on. And our ambition is really to ensure every baby has the best start in life, and our mantra is anything for baby. And kind of like the JBL example earlier, your kind of platform or big idea for your business can get lost. So how do you qualify it in general? And that's something that Gerber does every day, and making sure our quality standards, our sustainability standards, our nutrition standards are highest in the category and above for babies and for parents as well. You know, we have our Parents Resource Center in Fremont, Michigan, and they're communicating with moms every day, one-to-one engagement. We're including new kind of digital platforms in order for parents to communicate with our experts, whether it be lactation consultants, nutritionists, et cetera, just to make sure we are giving moms the right support in such an emotional time. So that's kind of what we stand for, and we instill that across the organization. And with purpose, if it doesn't start there, then communication is a Band-Aid. And we need to make sure that it really does lead from the full organization and that you're qualifying your purpose.
And I love that when we talked earlier, we were talking about communication is not actually the starting point. And you know, when we were building our brand, it was the same thing. If the experience doesn't support the brand promise in all parts of the product we develop, and the engineers and the people who talk to you don't do it. So two really interesting purposes. Richard, your purpose also very, very important. Tell us about your purpose-built approach.
So I'll give you so I've been in this part of my journey for 7 years, and before this, I was in the outside world. And so to very simply answer the question, and then I'll go into a little bit about what we do, is you have to start with actually having a purpose. And that may sound like, okay, I came down here to write that, but I can't tell you the number of companies that I'd worked with on a consulting basis that would say, we want to get into purpose-driven marketing, and you start to ask them what their purpose is. And they were more focused on the message and the marketing of purpose without really having a purpose. And that's really what drove me to look to take my career in a different way, and I joined the Navy. Somewhat literally about 7 years ago. And we do serve a purpose. We are a non-paid benefit for those who are in the military, who are serving, who have served, or dependents. We are there to provide quality goods and services at a savings. And we do that. We sell Gerber, we sell Levi's, someday we may sell OLIPOP. We provide goods and services around the globe. Where it might be convenient for someone to get it, or where it might be very inconvenient for someone to get it, we're there for them. So we're that value and convenience. We're also there to provide for quality of life. So we not only are trying to save our community money, but we can't keep revenue. So our revenue gets reinvested into improving our facilities, our technology, or it goes to quality of life programs across, in our case, the Navy. We have sister exchanges that we work with. And then also to be mission ready. When COVID hit, it was our organization that delivered the first medical grade face masks to the U.S. Navy Honor Guard and to the Roosevelt when it was under quarantine. So we live our purpose every day. It's a mission you philosophy that we have. In terms of how we market it, it's a challenge because, and I like what you said, if you're not purpose driven, then you're running a Super Bowl commercial to tell everybody how purpose driven you are, and you're going to get called out on it, and you should. If you are truly purpose driven, then you live it through your culture, and it becomes part of your community, becomes part of the story, it becomes part of the narrative, but it doesn't become the centerpiece of your marketing. And I think that's where we differentiate ourselves, and where true purpose-driven marketing has to differentiate itself, is through the telling of the narrative and through building and connecting with communities.
That's a great point. And Shane, how about you? Also, really important purpose and powered by technology.
Yeah, and I think to build on what Rich said, since we have sort of some of the same constituency, and it's an incredible, it's very easy to get behind, for Rich's team or for our team to get behind it because you're helping service members. And I think that purpose-driven, you have to live it. It's not just a tagline that's on the door. It's like your culture. What are you doing day to day? What are the behaviors? How are you reinforcing that? And for us, it's how do we make service members successful? So we have a lot of stakeholders. Maybe it's the family member, it's a service member, a member of the military, or it could be the military command. So it could be someone over at the Pentagon. But what are we doing day to day that makes that service member successful, and then getting everyone behind that? So I think for us, it's like, how are we living it? And then do people have a visceral reaction to it? So I think, with us, it's our team members, are they excited about what they're doing? And if you're coming into work every day saying, well, I'm helping this 18, 19-year-old who's just joined the military be successful in their career, help them stay connected to their family member, that becomes very easy then to fulfill that purpose and do the right thing every day.
So I think what you're talking about there is really the place where brand and culture come together, and the importance of having a really strong culture that supports your brand. And it's almost a symbiotic relationship, right, between the two. And each of you has talked about a little bit of sort of whether it was in the forefront or a little bit more in the back. But I think what's interesting is to be successful. For example, Richard, your purpose is not necessarily the first thing that is market facing, because you have to offer these goods and services. So you are really competing against other retailers, and so pressure coming from other retailers, Amazon, right? Who could service men and women, whereas before you were probably one of the only choices they had. So maybe talk a little bit about that shift.
It's interesting. We have a store, one of our larger stores in Bethesda, and it's on the Walter Reed. It's on NSA Bethesda, which is where Walter Reed is. And there's this, do we make it feel like a military store, and do we kind of put the purpose out there and everything and make you feel like you're shopping a military store? Or do we try to look like a Macy's or a Bloomingdale's and we provide you with that? And we've gone ditch to ditch in that. And really, what we're finding is it's somewhere in the middle. I'm going to be careful here, but I was a little bit critical of the visuals in the store, because as much as we were living the mission, you didn't see it other than when you saw folks come in wheelchairs. You didn't see that mission kind of seeded in through the store. And so I'm going to have a team come up and say, okay, how do we do it in a quiet, respectful way that's a gentle reminder, a humble reminder, without necessarily just having, pictures of ships and be so overt about it. And I think that's, I don't know if that's answering the question directly, but it's you have to kind of strike that balance there. Otherwise, it'll come off as not being authentic, because it isn't authentic. It's not something that you're going to push in someone's face and they're going to get it. The second part of that real quick is, and what we found, during COVID, we never shut down and our sales were up. We were a necessity. We open or close based on the base command, the base needs. We're part of that command structure. So we're there. Right now, there's a hurricane that's coming through. I'm getting my phone buzzing. We will stand up or stand down based on what we need to do. At that point in time, your patron needs you. Just like everybody will migrate to electric cars when gas is $5. If you're a brand that matters, they migrate to you when gas is $2. Or when there isn't, well, there's going to be a health epidemic for a while. But when the brand doesn't need you, do they come back to you because you built that connection? And that's what we're going through right now.
Right. I think that's a great example. And so you mentioned the word authenticity, and I talked about it earlier because, values are such an important driver for consumers. We've been tracking over the course of really the last 5 years, but more than ever, we see consumers saying they will choose based on their values. And their values, is not necessarily something that we always have access to in terms of data to make decisions. Gerber has a great example of really that stood on a value, but in a market, especially over the last 10 years, where people were shifting to organic or making, wanting to make their own baby food, right? How did you lean into your sort of authentic brand values and in your history in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy when you walk the talk, right? And in terms of our quality standards and basically farm to kitchen story, it's very simple. Our products have very simple ingredients in it, and the care we have is leading in the category. And to make sure that story comes through, showcases the quality. Moms cannot make every meal. And while shifts in behaviors are there, we have products that allow moms to make easy decisions when she can't make it herself. However, from a communication standpoint, how do we kind of amplify the right messaging? And sometimes we are not talking about our quality standards and our ingredients and sourcing. And I know we mentioned it before, there's a time and place to talk purpose. But if we're already doing it, communication isn't that Band-Aid. And it's really, at a time where they need to understand the care that you're putting into your products, that was a time for us to kind of accelerate and amplify further. So that was really a focus for us, and working with the farmers and even increasing our standards as well is super important. And we don't just focus on kind of the current standards that we have. It's pushing the boundaries. It's, we have research farms, and we have, research going on in general and education to ensure that we're pushing the boundaries for the future. So how do we educate people appropriately based on their knowledge in the space, and what resonates with them too? So in different capacities, we are educating the consumer as they're making a decision here. But in a place and a time where they are making aggressive shifts to organic, we've been making shifts with our products as well and our standards. Our farmers and our Gerber growers program, they're even helping farmers get to the organic standards as well. So making sure that we're a part of the process with them and our Gerber growers that have been with us for generations. So it's not only carrying our purpose and our Gerber family, but also the standards for baby, and that's what we've been communicating the past few years.
And speaking of pushing the boundaries, you started to tell us a little bit about the research that you do and the investment and the actual, but it's really quite extensive. I mean, it's really living the purpose, and not just living it, but investing in it. It takes a lot of money and resources to do some of the work that you're doing to prove the value and the health values. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's hard as a commercial entity to do purpose, right? Because those things kind of, if they get too conflated, you're in trouble, because like the research that we're doing, I don't think is really going to deliver an ROI for us. Like in terms of the growth of our business, it's expensive. Consumers actually don't care about it that much. That we have competitors in the industry that, are making like pretty wild claims. It's very unregulated. So the consequences of doing that are, pretty minimal. This is really just us setting out and saying, hey, if we're going to get up every morning, go and do something, we want to do something meaningful. And if it's not that, then we'll just stop doing it and do something else. And so, it was kind of nerve-wracking when those results came back from Purdue and Baylor, because we deliberately went to academic institutions. If you go, private entities, I'm sure some of you guys will know, with academic institutions, I mean, these are top researchers. You can't say, hey, it'd be really nice if the research kind of came out this way. It's going to come out how it comes out, right? So we knew that if that research didn't show what we wanted it to show, we were going to have to reformulate our product. It would have been commercially disastrous for us. But we were prepared to do it, because otherwise it's like, what's the point? fortunately, and it's interesting, these researchers, very understated people, they just sent us an email and it was like, I think this is what you're looking for. And we opened it and, showing drinking an OLIPOP a day helps increase microbial diversity in the gut, helps increase the production of bifidobacterium, which is the human probiotic present in breast milk. Also increasing the production of short-chain fatty acids, which are the secondary compounds that your gut produces when it's functioning properly. Which is amazing and pretty commercially useless to us as well, in all honesty. But, it helps we attract people to work in our team who see value in that want to get up every day with purpose and know that they're working on something that actually has meaning to it. And, my lesson in that really went back to, in my childhood, I grew up just outside of Liverpool in a fairly working class area. My mum was a school teacher. My dad worked for the local council on parks and open spaces. Those are purpose-driven jobs. So, as a head teacher of a school, like that was the ultimate purpose-driven entity for me. There was no commercial objective there. It was like your job is to kind of, look after and educate and support those kids. And if you're not doing that, then the school shuts down, essentially. That is, you can't like kind of make money and then sort of do that on the side. So there's kind of, we approach our work with a real humility. Like we're a commercial entity, right? So we have an objective to kind of make money. And so I think we're careful about how we conflate purpose with our commercial objectives. We have a hard line. I think it's one of the advantages of a founder-led business. We can decide to do that. We are a B Corp, which allows us to make decisions that aren't solely in the interest of maximizing shareholder value, which is important for us. And we tell that to our venture capital partners. We're like, look, here's how we're going to run this business. If you don't like it, don't put your money in, basically.
Yeah, I love that actually, because I was thinking about how much money did it cost to actually do this type of research. And I'm sure that some of the folks in the room that are managing food and beverage categories are probably thinking, wow, that's a lot of research and and at the same time, how do you communicate, by the way, this increases your microbiome gut health by X, and yet everyone was like, where's the weekend?
Well, I think exactly. I mean, to your point earlier, I don't think people care that much about this stuff. It's a reality, particularly when drinking soda. It's not an objective to improve your gut health. It's just not. Right. It's to have fun and relax. That's the objective. So I think it's important to understand that. I think what's changed from like the Mad Men era of marketing, where you could take kind of average products and put heavy marketing spend behind them. Now with social media and search, like we have a white paper on our research. So if you really want to go and check it out, like you can go and check it out and read the white paper. I'm not going to try and convince you of anything. Like it's a white, there's an academic paper there. You can go and read it for yourself and arrive at your own conclusion. And people do that. And I think that's kind of where things are going in terms of, consumers are getting curious. Some are, a small portion. And, it's an interesting shift.
Yeah, I know when you and I first talked, I was like, oh, are you marketing to people who really care about your health? And you're like, no, actually, no, that's not who we want. So speaking about health and wellness and starting a journey, Shane, the purpose of your company is really to help our soldiers, men and women servicemen actually start the journey with military in a really meaningful way. And so I'm thinking when we hear David talk about, well, hey, this is what our company is, I would imagine that similar to you can attract people, and really attracting technology is important, right, as you build that.
Yeah, and I think one interesting point that David brought up, and maybe it would contrast, maybe say something like Gerber, which is, has been around a lot longer, a lot bigger, and a bigger ship to move. What's interesting, I guess, with a smaller group, so we're only 80, team size of about 80 folks, 8 years old, company, organization. The purpose or culture can be driven a lot by the founding team and the executive team. So much so that almost some of the culture and the purpose is driven by the personality traits of some of the key executives for good or for bad. So I think it maybe makes it a little bit easier from there because it's sort of a top-down approach. You get people getting on the bus with you because they agree with you, they're aligned to your purpose and your vision. But for us with those younger service members, it is that, and that's what we again, it comes back to every behavior that we do, and we would start getting pretty bad Glassdoor reviews, or it would start impacting our retention if we said, hey, we want to make service members successful, and then within the next 2 or 3 weeks, we started doing stuff internally that wasn't fully aligned to that. So I think that's just something that we constantly keep top of mind, but again, it's driven by the behaviors of the leadership the whole way down.
And does it apply in the engineering area? So, I mean, I think this is you and I kind of partnering here on the other sides of this. From a technology perspective, you have the engineers kind of really, and we think like, do engineers get motivated by that? Are they thinking, I'm gonna need to work on this so that I can help bridge this relationship between servicemen and women and their families and their loved ones?
Yeah, so I'm a recovering engineer. That's what my background is in. When I told our director of marketing I was coming over, he ran brand for Toyota, and when I told him I was coming over, he was like, what are they doing getting you to talk about branding? You're not the guy, like, I'll go instead of you. But I think so, right? Because you look at somewhere like, Palantir Technologies that is doing stuff around, the military as well. And, at times you can hear stories of people sleeping under their desks because, hey, we need to work on this technology because it helps national security, or I need to work on this because I'm a scientific researcher and this is helping towards a greater mission of health or science or whatever else. So I think for engineers, it might be slightly different in terms of the messaging. I think they take, you talk about customer-driven organizations. For us, one of the best things we can do is get our engineers out talking to customers, seeing how they use the product. And then they get excited around it and they see how customers are interacting, and then they see the frustration, they see the pain point and what it's solving, and then they take individual pride in the work. So slightly different, but I do think there's still that purpose and mission behind it as well.
Absolutely. So we're talking a lot about all the positive outcomes, and there's obviously a lot of positive outcomes, but sometimes the purpose-driven route can be really challenging. So just curious, from your perspective, Richard, what are some of the challenges you faced in trying to be purpose-driven? I think you talked a little bit about, the market shifts, and this is a very attractive audience, really, right? Just from the size. You were talking to David earlier, hey, our average is, what's the challenge like for you? How do you overcome the challenge of being purpose-driven? Is there a story that you've got that you can share?
Challenges from a couple of perspectives. Challenges in executing the purpose, and then challenges in staying connected to the purpose. And I like what the other panelists have said, which is, if you're tying your purpose to a product, go back. Your purpose is, and we call customers patrons. So your purpose is your patron, and the product or the means of delivery of the product is really secondary. And I think sometimes when you get wrapped up into the business, and if you think about the last 3 years, and you think about the last year with supply chain issues, it is easy to get separated from that because you're sleeping under your desk worried about getting orders and having things go back and forth. And the more separated you get from that, the more disaligned you can be with what your core purpose is. How do you overcome that? It's easy to say culture. It's easy to, the problem is, how do you do that with 12,000, 14,000 associates around the globe? How do you do that when there's a takeover? How do you do that when you're under siege? For me, I find it's a little bit in the narrative. It's a little bit in those micro moments. Very quick story. So my daughter's a senior in high school. I am relearning everything I learned, especially history, because it turns out what I learned 35 years ago really isn't an accurate depiction. So I'm enjoying learning a better version of history, and hopefully it gets better 70 years from now. And she's studying literature and the use of myth to basically tell a story to get past the reader having to go through the white paper. And I don't want to say myth, but I think those micro moments in those stories matter. And so we will boil that down to, anybody here connected to Ben & Jerry's in any way? This is a good thing, okay? I have our social feed that goes to my phone because that's what I do. And we have someone in Yokosuka, Japan who posted on Instagram that she went to go to one of our stores to get Ben & Jerry's, couldn't because they were out, and it was because we've had problems with shipping channels. And she posted how disappointed she was because she had had a rough day. And so we had the store go out of their way to make sure when we got it, to get it to them. With as many patrons as we serve, sometimes you have to boil it down to that micro moment to kind of connect you and remind you that despite the storm, but despite the 1.2 billion containers that are backed up, between everything going on, it really comes down to the customer and how do you connect with that. And as long as you can ground yourself with it, I think you can get past the challenges.
That's a great example. And I know we
And
talked.
by the way, I have the picture on my phone of when she had the Ben & Jerry's and she was walking out and was just hyper excited. So
We love those moments. I thought maybe we were going to bring out the Ben & Jerry's, and then that would be perfect because, we have people have food coma, but I think they're still alive out there.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, one of the things you talked about is kind of revisiting it and the continuum, and you made a mention of that, and I was thinking of the conversation that you and I had about it is a continuum. It's like a touchstone to kind of come back and go, okay, how does things have changed in the environment. We talked about, we were chatting and we were talking about how important our data shows that people will buy from a brand that supports pro-choice. And I said, gosh, like as marketers, we never, one, where do we even get data, such as data, right? Like as a brand. And two, like did we factor that in? And so things change and the consumer evolves and things are important. And then this purpose becomes a touchstone. And you talked a little bit about how Gerber always is revisiting it.
Yeah, I think a big thing is that when you start, well, I say a red flag is when I'm in the room too early in ideating around purpose, because then it's already gotten to activation phase. And then we're already looking at consumer feedback, and that's very short term. Your purpose needs to be greater than that. It's where the trend's going, and also what do we want our brand to stand for? And as brands are accelerating growth, you need to revisit that a lot. And Gerber has done that throughout the years. And it is across the full organization, but it starts at the top. And really, how do you, as you're accelerating growth, are you keeping to kind of the high standards, the quality standards? And I have to admit, we're going through it right now again, based on kind of the category and trends going on right now. Do we have the top quality product? And it's something that we need to navigate. And we're looking at our purpose. What do we want to stand for in the future? Not only what does the consumer think about our brand right now, because that's current. It's where the trend's going and what is going to be best for baby in the future based on all of the research. Parents might not care about that research, but we need to do it to understand where we're going. So I think it will be crucial, and it's a great time. But I always say that if I'm in the room, my team's in the room, and we're looking at consumer feedback, it's a red flag, because we really, we're already in activation and Band-Aid mode. So I think right now Gerber is actively looking at kind of what those standards will be in the future for baby and what we're going to stand for in the future as we're accelerating growth in different areas for the business.
And so when you say what do we stand for in the future, it's really about holding on to the original purpose, but how does it become relevant today? Is that how you think about it?
Exactly. It's kind of consistency, like you mentioned. So it's just those standards are changing, and how do we ensure the full organization is rallying around it? The turnover within the last couple of years across every organization is massive. And how do we ensure folks are still rallying around the same ideas and philosophies? And that we're qualifying these standards for the future. And then culture comes after, right? If we're all rallying around the same ideas and visions, then it makes it easy. But we need to ensure that we're constantly questioning it, and that we have those right qualifiers and filters across the organization to do so. And then communication comes last. We can seed ideas, we can see what resonates to drive relevance for the consumer, but those aren't long-term trends. So it's something that we need to ensure the organization is addressing before we go into activation mode.
Awesome. So, David, challenges for you. Are there challenges that you saw in the development of being a purpose-built company?
Yeah, I think it makes it very hard, because without ethics, it's very easy to compete, right? I mean, if you remove that, you have a lot more strategic optionality. So, trying to stick to these things, I think there is an awareness that it's, it makes it harder, and so you have to work harder. So we've taken various decisions, around, mentioned doing the research, which we would be where we are now if we hadn't done that research, I think. I don't think it would have impacted our volume at all. We made a decision to not use plastic and just be in aluminum. I think we could be in a much better commercial position if we had done that. So, you have to absorb that, and then you have to work a lot harder as a result, I think, and because you have to recognize what you're competing against. Coke, Pepsi don't have those restrictions on, their commercial operations. So yeah, it makes things a lot harder for sure.
Interesting. Anyone else have choices where you had to make, I mean, it's a great example, right? That lower cost option might have been aluminum, but the sustainability and the sort of authenticity of your brand was around, would have been plastic, right? But you went with the what was most aligned to your values. Does anyone else have examples where, hey, hard choices had to be made and it cost us, but it was the right thing to do for the brand?
I'll give you an example, but I can't tell you what the example is.
Why do I feel like this is
Top secret and
Yes.
the thing we talked about on the phone.
it's such a DC thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I don't mean it to be, but we were working on an application, and somewhere along the process, and we invested considerably in it, it was a few years before we knew you, we lost the connection with the end user. It became people internally trying to develop something cool. And I've always said, if I talk to a group of young marketers, do you want to build marketing that makes a difference or that wins awards? Because sometimes you don't get both. And if you're doing it right, you're not focused on the award. And this was an application that we built, and after a significant investment and looking at it and having the end user not applaud it, but say, why did you do this? We had to scrap it. And it was very challenging in a world where we don't make investments like that to bring it back and say, we've just invested 3 years in a significant amount, and I don't think it's fixable, and I would not put this out because it's not going to solve anything for the patron. It makes us feel good, but it doesn't accomplish anything. And that's a very, very difficult decision.
Right. How about you, Shane? Any example that you have for that? Hard choices?
I think a couple of things come to mind, but I think one of them is, to Rich's point, talking to the, yes, you can be purpose-driven and very strong mindset, almost dogmatic in what you're trying to do. And sometimes, particularly with smaller companies, you need to do that. You need to be a force of will, keep driving, keep pushing up the hill, and finally we'll get there. But if you're not talking to the customers, to your consumers, to your end stakeholder, there's definitely, a risk there, and you definitely end up drinking your own Kool-Aid. And I think you see that a lot with smaller companies, where company goes out, raises money, says, this is why we're doing this. They sell the VCs on it, sell everyone. And then a year down the line, they've effectively just believing what they start selling internally rather than externally on it. And you end up building this thing because, hey, it's a sunk cost and there's an investment in it. So I think not a very specific example as to, there's probably times where we've done that, where we've been like, we have to do this to help the service member. And the service member should be like, we actually don't care. Like, this isn't a big enough problem for me. Or, our biggest constituency is 18 to 24-year-olds. And we have a bunch of veterans who were, E9, former sergeant majors, generals, stuff like that. And we're like, it's been like, you didn't have technology when you were going through boot camp or basic training or anything. Like, it was 40 years ago. You don't know this constituency. We need to talk to them. The mission, the purpose, the vision is there. But this isn't the way they want to receive this content or this technology or the delivery of this product or service.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think you're actually educating kind of in some ways you have to educate the military about how they can restart these military journeys with younger people. I mean, that's not something that they're necessarily collecting, a ton of research on. So we're getting near the end of our session, so I'm going to go around and ask everyone, is there one particular piece of advice that you have for anyone who's thinking about, hey, I want to bring purpose-driven more into the forefront of my team or my organization or my brand? Is there one solid piece of advice, like a moment, the discovery that you had that you could share that would help the audience kind of walk away with something?
Yeah, I mean, I would just thinking of something different than what we've discussed. Internal versus external communication, I think, was a big learning in general, right? I mean, one of our big commitments is that we are going carbon neutral by 2035. That's an aggressive commitment we made last year. And when I see the consumer angle in terms of communication, there's so many different areas to go into, but a lot of it is table stakes for them. They have high expectations and they'll call us out. So we have a great commitment, but at times it does not make sense to bring it up because when they get in store, they want variety. They're looking for taste, and at times they really don't care about purpose at all. So it's making sure that we're communicating it to them at the right time. However, there has been so much work that has gone into becoming carbon neutral by 2035. It's emotional for people. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of dollars. You need to be conscious of that. And as you're communicating externally, you need a different strategy internally, and making sure that there's differentiators and you're celebrating your successes appropriately. It should not be the same as external. While we might not celebrate all of those successes externally, it's fine, but you need to differentiate to drive the culture as well, knowing it's a long-term goal and it takes a lot of work from everyone.
I think that's a great point, actually. David?
I think it's worth just meditating on like what it is you're trying to do, basically. Like what's your objective? I always think about like, what if a bank's goal was to provide liquidity and credit to low-income families, for example, and then it sets you on a very different strategic path. And there's two things I think you got to think through. One is, can we make this commercially viable? Because I've seen a lot of people set out with a goal, but like you can do an analysis on that pretty quickly, and you're like, that is not commercially viable, and you're then going to get in a pickle with it. And the second thing is, so if you do see commercial viability, and if you marry that up at the beginning, the second bit's going to be easier, which is when you get to very hard points in the road, are you going to make the tough decision? Because that is the reality is that's what it's going to require. Like, how committed are you to the thing versus, a commercial outcome? And, if ultimately the honest answer is, ultimately we need to, like, increasing revenue is the thing that supersedes everything, you're never going to stick to it because it doesn't, in my experience, it doesn't give you that commercial upside. So there has to be something driving you beyond that, essentially.
How about you, Richard?
So to layer on to what they've said, because I would place this in a lower priority, I think one of the things I would make sure that you do is always understand your competition in the competitive landscape. But if you're spending more time studying and following your competition and not studying and following your customer, you're probably in trouble. And that might sound simple, but more and more I see people and hear people saying, we're trying to be like. No, we want to be a solution for this customer base, and this is why, and have that be your core purpose.
Awesome. Shane?
I think I'll just get really tactical in terms of like what any of us can do with our teams to connect them back to the purpose or mission. It's what are some of those rituals that we do on a day-to-day or weekly basis that connect us back to it. So for us, we have our team members talk to members of the military, whether it's through writing them letters or on the phone, and then, telling customer stories internally. But it's like, yes, it's very easy to sit in, an ivory tower and say, okay, this is the purpose, this is the mission, whatever, but how are we executing that on the ground, and how are we building that into the internal organization on a day-to-day basis as well?
Yep, I love that. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the panel. Please give us a round of applause. These guys were awesome.